I brought you into this world, I can bring you out, or put you back out, rather.
Yeah. I think Rothbard went terribly wrong. In Ethics of Liberty, Murray Rothbard talks about the abortion issue. It's like, well, you can't, he says you can't kill the baby, right? But you can evict the baby from the mother's womb, and then the baby's on its own, right? That basically,
which, of course, it would not be able to feed itself. And so it would starve to death, right?
Maybe it's not even at this point viable outside of the womb, right? So if you're going to say, you're in the first 3 months of a pregnancy and you're going to, induce labor, well, what you're doing is you're creating a miscarriage, right? But it's not that's not your problem because you have no obligation. I think that and a lot of the stuff that I hear about parental obligations in libertarian circles is absolutely horrific.
It sounds really cold.
It's terrible. So, I mean, even if you're talking about a baby who's, let's say you're 8 months pregnant, you evict the baby from the womb. Like by the Rothbardian ethical standard, you can, and it's one of very few things I disagree with Rothbard on.
Right, you're a big fan of his, generally.
That you can just, evict the baby and just, go leave it off on a snowbank to just die of freezing and exposure, right? Or just, go put the thing in a corner somewhere and let it cry until it's dead. And that's sick. I would say that, look, nobody gets to childbearing age in this world these days and does not know where babies come from. You incur obligations through your actions. And I've got an article on my website titled on evictionism and abortion, where I say, look, imagine that I go and I start creating pipe bombs in my garage, preparing for the zombie apocalypse, and then at the end of the season finale of The Walking Dead, I lose interest. I can't just go throw these things in the garbage can and wait for the trash man to come pick it up, because if his trash compactor goes and crushes these things and explodes it, I'm now responsible for the life and property that those things destroy.
That would definitely be criminal negligence at the very least.
Certainly. So if I go and I create a baby, I can either be responsible for the proper care and feeding of that infant, or I could be responsible for its death. And the only way that I can, how do I say get rid of that obligation is to have somebody else take it over. Now, the thing that Rothbard does make the point of in Ethics of Liberty is that, in the absence of the state, adoption will be a lot easier. So if you evict a viable fetus and then somebody's going to go put it in an incubator for a little while, there's plenty of people who are like, I love babies, right? There's no shortage of people in this world who love children.
Lots of people want babies, but they can't have them.
Right. But right now, the adoption process, at least in the United States, is so ridiculous. You're going to pay $100,000, $150,000, and you're probably going to be importing the baby from across the planet.
Yeah.
And that's why over 1 million babies are aborted in abortion clinics every year in the United States. Infants are being created in such staggering numbers, but people are going to go pay $150,000 to pull a kid over from India, and it's all the regulatory process. It's sick.
Ted?
You're making a couple of good points, but my retort would be that you're not following this to its conclusion, right? Like, in the absence of state, your babies are going to be more your property than they are even right now. And thus, the actions that you take with your property is up to you, right? Like, you can make the case that it's the same as, like, throwing bombs in the trash can, where it's going to damage other people's property. But whenever you're only damaging your own property, that's a little bit different.
So the case that Ted's making here is that the baby is property, and my premise on this is that yes, it's the result of the mother and father's labor, and usually the result of your labor is your property. But we're talking about a human being, and basic libertarian principle says you don't own human beings. Okay, so a baby owns itself. Now, a mother and father are sort of the stewards of that custodianship, right?
Caretakers.
They have to guide the child. Look, if the child wants to have a steady diet of cocaine and Tic Tacs, you don't let a baby do that, right? You have to. They are going to control an infant's life, so they are stewards of that relationship. But it's the same thing if you tell me that I've got to, go take care of your house for a little while. You expect me not to burn it down. I'm supposed to be a good steward of that custodianship, and so a parent has a basic obligation to do right by the child, which they are obligated to.
Essentially, it's a social obligation, and that's what it is, right? It's like not a contract or anything that you've specifically agreed to, but it's just that people won't tolerate you if you don't follow that obligation. I would say that it's an implicit contract with the child. Now, we don't have agency in it, so I'm not saying that we can go out and ban abortions or go and enforce things against mothers who abort their babies, but I would say that it's entirely appropriate to ostracize them from a society. The issue there is that you are supposed to be taking you incur obligations. If I go walk into a restaurant and I order
some food. They don't make me sign a contract in advance that I'm going to pay it. It's an implicit contract.
Right.
I have incurred an obligation by doing a thing. By creating an infant, we all know how babies are made, okay? Nobody gets pregnant by accident. I'm sick of hearing about this. People don't get pregnant by accident. They know where babies come from. It's easy enough to avoid. So unless somebody's being raped, then there's a potential to avoid this. So you're incurring an obligation when you create a life to be a good steward of that life.